So, I want to talk about some of the fallacious bullshit and just flat out wrong beliefs that I see expressed the most among people who I guess could be under the umbrella of libertarians, individualists, Americanists, free market capitalists, kind of like the individualist right. Some of the most common fallacies and just kind of flawed arguments and flawed perspectives that I see them constantly expressing. And I'm going to go through them one by one and explain why I strongly disagree with them and why I think that they're just not good arguments. So, the first is overestimating one's own individual ability. I see this time and time again where people of this nature will say that they feel safe in a certain situation because they're overconfident in their own ability. And on the flip side, they really hate being in any situation where they're not totally in control. So it's kind of a combination of being a control freak and being unwilling to surrender control to anyone else at all, but also being overconfident in one's own abilities. And some examples that we see of this is how they always seem to hate the idea of taking public transit because they don't like giving up control to someone else, like because somebody else is driving the vehicle or the train or whatever it is. And they seem to feel overly confident and overly safe on the road, even though statistically speaking, you're in far more danger of crashing in a personal vehicle than on public transit. Like in terms of the risk of a fatality, it's not even close. It's not even in the same ballpark. But yet they feel safer and more comfortable driving a car because they're so overconfident in their own abilities. And I mean, yeah, obviously they'll talk about violence on public transit too, but at the same time, it's like, I mean, I don't know if there's ever been a study that have compared the two, but I would guess that you're still probably in more danger overall on the road. Like road accidents are something that people just aren't afraid of enough. Another example of this is how a lot of these people, like kind of going along with what I'm saying about violence on transit, not just on transit, but in general, a lot of them, they feel very afraid of crime unless they're allowed to carry a gun. And then if they're allowed to carry a gun, they suddenly have no fear of crime whatsoever. They feel empowered to walk into the most dangerous neighborhood and by themselves and they'll be fine. It's the same with just at home, like living in the most dangerous neighborhood. Like, oh, as long as I have a gun. They have this idea that like they are the best shot in the world, that if anyone else tries to shoot them, they're the better shot. They are Max Payne. They're basically like Max Payne in bullet time, and everybody else are just the random NPCs who Max Payne is shooting. That's literally what they think of themselves, because it's like all fear suddenly evaporates if they're allowed to have a gun. Like they are so overconfident in their own shooting abilities. And it's also, it raises the question, it's like, why are you so overconfident with a gun but not without a gun? Like you think you're the best shot in the world, but in a fist fight you'll get your ass kicked. I don't know. It's just kind of weird, like this overconfidence in one area and this underconfidence in the other. It's also like assuming the criminals A won't have guns themselves, B won't outnumber you, C won't be better shots than you, D won't get the drop on you. Like there's just so many flaws to this mentality, but I've seen it time and time again where they will say like, oh, the United States has a higher homicide rate, it's more dangerous overall, but I can have a gun there, so I'm safer there, compared to like a country in Europe that has a homicide rate 1/5 as high. It's like, no, I'm sorry, with or without the gun, you're still more likely probably to get murdered in the United States. Because you know what? You're probably not Max Payne. Statistically, you probably aren't. Unless you're literally like some special forces guy, you probably aren't at that level. So that's one, just the overconfidence in their own abilities. And um This kind of dovetails into the next thing, which is thinking that everyone else has the same ability as themselves. So, in other words, in some cases, yes, they might be more capable than the average person. In some cases, no. But regardless, it doesn't necessarily matter, because if you impose a certain policy, it kind of has to apply to the average person. If you're above it, it's like good for you, but it's still going to ruin society. An example of this would be drug legalization. A lot of libertarians, they're very strongly in favor of legalizing drugs, even including hard drugs. And it's the same with like a lot of dangerous things, like say like driving laws, or like with seatbelt laws, they want there to be no seatbelt laws. They want there to be like no protections regarding food, like consumer protection laws regarding food ingredients and things like that. And their argument is often, well, I'm smart enough to avoid all the unhealthy shit, so it's fine. It's like, I mean, I doubt that a lot of these libertarians are telling the truth, that they're smart enough to avoid this shit, because a lot of libertarians seem to be into like cocaine and vaping. And it's like neither cocaine nor vaping is healthy for you. So, I mean, that's one thing right there, is that I doubt that they're telling the truth. So it goes back to the whole thing that I said before about overestimating their own abilities. But it's like, okay, even in any of these situations, let's assume you are telling the truth. So what? Just because you have the ability to, the self-control to resist doing hard drugs, doesn't mean that the average person does. If you legalize hard drugs, drug addiction will spike. Like, we've already seen this with like marijuana legalization. Like, the marijuana use has increased, and it seems like hard drug use is increasing too, even though we haven't legalized hard drugs. Although there are these like mushroom cafes that are technically illegal that I see popping up all over the place. And it's like, what are the police doing about this? But regardless, my point is, just because you have the self-control to say no to readily available, legalized hard drugs that are shoved in your face everywhere, it doesn't mean everyone does. It doesn't mean the average person has that ability. And frankly, yes, it will be bad for society as a whole. So it's like, okay, if you're the kind of person where you can resist every possible temptation, like hard drugs, unhealthy food, dangerous sex, just doing dumb stunts and stuff like that, like Jackass. Like, if you're the kind of person who can resist the temptation to do anything stupid, it's like good for you, but it's going to ruin society. And it's like, people say, oh, but it's eugenic. It's like, is it eugenic though? I mean, I kind of feel like it would just be a society where everybody's getting hurt and killed. And if anything, the people who would survive in that society would be like extremely risk averse people. And it's like, I don't know, is that eugenic? Like, is it eugenic to let the risk takers kill themselves, even though risk takers can actually be some of the most productive and innovative people in other ways? So it's like, I don't know, is this eugenic or not? I don't know. But either way, even if it is eugenic, even if you accept that premise, you know what? I'm just not enough of a cold, heartless fuck to support a society where everything is dangerous, everything can kill you, and your chance of getting killed is just very high because there's so many dangers everywhere, simply because like for the sake of eugenics, or because a small percentage of people are smart enough and have enough self-control to withstand everything. So it's like, no, I'm sorry. Like, when it comes to so many things, like I see the libertarian mentality on this with like drugs, with like a lot of like dangerous driving, with all kinds of things. And it's like, I'm sorry, but no, just because you can resist the temptation, and again, maybe you can, maybe you can't, doesn't mean the average person can. Another thing that relates directly to this is not understanding indirect consequences. And this is perhaps one of the biggest. This is one of the biggest for these types of people. They do not understand indirect consequences at all. So like, for instance, if they support legalizing drugs, they don't see how legalizing drugs can result in other types of crime increasing because of addicts who are desperately motivated to get their next high, who will commit all kinds of crimes for the sake of doing it. They do not understand the indirect consequences of allowing people to do hard drugs. Like, it's like, oh, we're reducing crime because we're making it legal. It's like, yes, but the people who do these drugs will commit other crimes, and they'll commit them more because they're addicts. They'll commit them more than if they weren't addicted to these drugs. Like, you don't seem to understand the idea of indirect consequences. And it's the same with global warming. Like, okay, the thing with global warming is I feel like a lot of these people, they fundamentally refuse to believe in global warming because the very idea of indirect consequences is incomprehensible to them. Like, the idea that like emitting carbon could destroy the Earth's atmosphere, it's like it's incomprehensible to them because it's so indirect. It's the same as with the big event of 2020. It's like don't get me wrong, all the restrictions, they went way too far. But at the same time, like the people who advocated absolutely zero restrictions, it's like they don't understand the idea of indirect consequences. They don't understand the idea that like you might be able to handle getting sick with a certain pathogen, but maybe some like 90-year-old granny can't handle it if you get her sick. Like, they don't seem to understand the idea of indirect consequences at all. And again, I am not backpedaling. I'm not saying that I retroactively support all the measures. Like, the restrictions went way too far. But my point is, the people who were against even the tiniest restrictions, or against even like voluntarily doing anything to stop the spread of the pathogen, like they take this mentality really far. The whole like not being able to understand or not giving a shit about indirect consequences. And it's the same as like, for instance, people who say like they call themselves white nationalists, but then they race mix with like Asian women and have half Asian kids, and they don't understand the idea that like having half Asian kids can have indirect consequences on society by making multiracialism more the norm. They're like, oh, but my kid has a high IQ, my kid's smart. It's like, yes, but you're still normalizing multiracialism, multiculturalism, and mixing. So it's like they don't understand. And again, when you normalize it, it'll apply in other circumstances too. Like, you know, white woman, black man. It's like they don't understand the idea of indirect consequences at all. Like, they don't understand the idea that your actions don't take place in a vacuum and that they can have indirect consequences on other people, or that and this leads me into my next point, like not understanding that like there are certain things that can be relatively harmless if one person does it, but can be very harmful if everyone does it. Okay, I'll give you a direct example. In Edinburgh, there's this statue of this little dog. And there's this tradition where people will rub the nose of the dog because they think it's cute or whatever. Here's the thing. One person rubbing the nose of the dog does basically like infinitesimal damage to the statue. It's hardly any damage at all. But if everybody rubs the nose of the dog, it wears away at the statue and damages it. If hundreds, thousands of people do this every year. This is one thing a lot of libertarian types, like individualist, libertarian, conservative, whatever you want to call them, they don't get this. They don't get that, like, yes, there are certain things that are absolutely like minimally harmful if one person does them, like minimally harmful to society. There's not really that much of an impact, but if everybody does them, it has quite a lot of an impact. Like, for instance, okay, here's another thing, singing in public. Let's say you're just walking down the street and singing. It's like, okay, it's slightly annoying, but if everybody does it, then that's really, really fucking annoying. Or same with like blaring really loud music from your car, or modding your car to make it louder. It's like, again, some of these things, well, actually, some of these people mod their cars so loud that like even one person doing it is severely annoying. But that's what I'm saying. There's a lot of things where it's like, okay, if one person does it, who cares? But like if everybody does it, then it actually does become severely detrimental. And that's why there's rules and in some cases even laws in place that'll stop you from doing it. Because it's like, yeah, fair enough, you're not causing that much harm. But if everybody does this thing, then yes, it will. And that's okay, again, or like graffiti, that would be another good example of that. Like one person making a tiny bit of graffiti, who cares? But if everybody does it and there's graffiti everywhere, then everything just looks hideous. So again, I'm not trying to say that all these things need to be punished with an iron fist. Like in some cases like this, I think it's more appropriate to have like kind of moderate punishments as opposed to like absurdly strict ones. But at the same time, there's truth. Like, yes, if everybody does certain things, it does hurt society. And this idea that like you're special, is it even that they think that they're special, or is it that they literally cannot comprehend the idea of cumulative consequences? Like, I think it's more that they just can't comprehend it. They just see every person as existing in a vacuum. And yeah, like every person's totally autonomous, 100% autonomous, and their actions only affect themselves. Like they don't seem to get it that we live in a society. In line with this is just not understanding tragedy of the commons / prisoner's dilemma. Like, or maybe they understand it, but they always go with the selfish option. And it's like, if you always go with the selfish option, it's going to ruin society for everyone. Like, basically what tragedy of the commons and prisoner's dilemma is like, there's some situations where doing what benefits you and doing what benefits society is the opposite. So if everyone does what benefits themselves, society will be worse. If everyone does what will benefit society, it will harm them on a personal level a bit. But it would ultimately be better for everyone if everybody did what benefited society. Now, again, with it's a complicated issue because like there are some cases where it does make sense to take the selfish option. But I'm saying that like if everybody does the selfish thing every single time, it's going to make society worse. Society's going to be a hellhole. So there has to be some amount of high trust. And that's another thing. Like I think a lot of like these people, they want radical individualism, but they want a high trust society at the same time. And it becomes kind of incompatible at a certain point when everybody's entirely looking out for themselves to have a high trust society. Like there has to be a certain amount of compromise. And I think that's another issue is like, yeah, they want both these things at once. They want to have their cake and then shit on it too. Like they want to have a high trust society, but they also want to have a very hyper individualistic society. It's like you can't really have both because high trust inherently involves a certain amount of compromise. It inherently means like, yes, you will let the person who's not paying as a customer use your bathroom sometimes, you know? Like, yes, you will let your neighbor trespass onto your property because they're chasing a lost dog. And yeah, that's a personal example, by the way. I'm saying that from personal experience. I had some neighbors get a bit pissed at me for doing that. So yeah, I mean, I think there's a certain amount of give and take there. And that's something these people don't understand is that you can't have it both ways, not in the extreme. You can't have it extremely high trust, but also extremely individualistic with everyone looking out for themselves. And that's why Scandinavia is probably historically the highest trust society because they are more collectivist. And that's why American society, even at its most high trust, isn't quite as high trust, at least not historically, as Scandinavia. In the parts of the US that probably are the highest trust are probably some of the regions that are more collectivist, like say, at least historically, Minnesota. I mean, obviously Minnesota is becoming, well, at least Minneapolis is becoming more crime-ridden lately. But like, yeah, Minnesota, which has a lot of Swedes, or like Vermont, which has its own kind of high trust French thing going on. Yeah. But anyway, another issue with these people is not understanding the idea that power abhors a vacuum. Like, they have this naive idea that you can have a society with no government or with minimal government, and that somebody else won't just try to become the government. Like that Amazon won't step up and become the new government in the absence of a strong government. They underestimate this idea, or that like some warlord won't step up or whatever. Now, to be fair, this isn't something that all these people unanimously think, because some of them do actually believe in the idea of minimal government, but they also believe in the idea of having a strong military and police to preserve that minimal government. Like, I think some American patriots do think that way, but there's others who are like really hardcore libertarians who I think are naive in that regard, and they think that you can have a state like theirs, but yet without having any kind of power to enforce it. And that's what happens. If you try to have this minimalist government, it'll just get replaced by a stronger government. So that's something, again, this one I don't think is as universal among these people, but I do think it's a problem with a lot of their thinking. The next is underestimating the costs of anything the government does. And this goes along with like always complaining about taxes, always complaining about government spending, always complaining about pampered federal employees or state employees in general. It's this idea that like everything that the government does is super cheap. And it's like, no, it's not. A lot of services the government provides are quite expensive. Like a lot of the infrastructure, the services, a lot of these things are way more expensive than people realize. And the reason is because they don't pay for it directly. So because they don't pay for it directly, they don't see the indirect costs. They don't see the actual costs of these things, of like highways and roads and trains and water. Well, I guess we do pay for water utilities, that's true. But even then, like sometimes the amount we pay doesn't cover the true costs. Or like national parks or museums or energy or all kinds of things. Like they don't see the costs of the things, or police or firefighters. Like they don't see the costs of the things that the government provides. And it's partly because they don't pay for it directly. That like they pay for it indirectly through taxes, but they don't pay on a per cost basis. It's not like, you know, you hand over money to the police officer every time the police officer helps you. It's not like you don't pay a road, at least not every road has tolls. Like there's not always a direct cost where you pay per interaction, per use. You pay in a more indirect sense through taxes. And it's like, I think a lot of these people, because they pay indirectly, they can't break down the costs in their mind. They can't see where the money's going. They can't visualize it. They can't understand it. Whereas like if they pay $15 for a hamburger, they can visualize the cost of the hamburger. So that would be an example where I think they underestimate the costs of everything the government does for that reason. And to be fair, yes, there is government waste, but there's also private sector waste. And that's another thing, is that they condemn government waste, but they're totally okay with private sector waste. They're okay with private sector inefficiency and with things in the private sector costing way more than they should. Like there's a lot of things in the private sector that are way overpriced. Like say for instance, printer ink. Printer ink is a fucking racket, and it has been a racket for a very long time. It is so overpriced relative to the value. And there's a lot of things like this in the private sector that are just really, really expensive, and probably more expensive than they should be. And a lot of it is private sector greed and private sector waste. Corporations lining their pockets, especially the higher level people within these corporations. And they absolutely do waste money. They absolutely do waste time. They absolutely do line their pockets. And that's true even at the mid levels, and even to an extent the low levels. Like there is corporate inefficiency in the private sector also. It's not like every public sector employee is super lazy and every private sector employee works super hard. This is just a myth. I mean, is the private sector more efficient overall? I don't know, but there's certain things that just aren't profitable. That's another thing. Certain things just don't work in the private sector because they're not profitable, and the private sector will agitate against them. It'll undermine them. If they, like, say for instance, public transit's a good example. It's just not historically profitable. Same with national parks and museums and a lot of things related to tourism, like historic architecture, like things that, like, okay, like hotels are profitable, restaurants are profitable, but they will undermine themselves by destroying the things that people come there to see because they don't see the direct profit in it. It's like, okay, a good example of this is Niagara Falls. Like, if you allow the private sector to just go too far with building shit, they will start ruining the thing that you came there to see by overbuilding near it with all the like casino towers and stuff like that. And Niagara Falls actually kind of led to the creation of the national park system because they realized what a mistake it was to allow so much development so close to this beautiful natural wonder. So again, this is a perfect example. Like, imagine if every national park looked like Niagara Falls. Like, imagine Yosemite or the Grand Canyon or Zion or any of these places, or Banff, with like casino towers, massive casino towers everywhere next to every natural wonder. It's really good that that didn't happen. And again, this is something where the private sector just fails because the private sector will always support building the casino towers because it's like, hey, we can maximize profit this way. Yosemite will be more profitable if we build casino towers on each side of Yosemite Valley. Same with the Grand Canyon. We just build the casino towers. People will still come to see the natural wonder, but they'll also come to gamble. They'll also come to enjoy the entertainment in these towers, these casino hotel towers that we build on each side of it. So it's like, yes, absolutely. That is what the private sector does. So keeping these places pristine and untouched is not profitable. And that's why the national park system exists. And yes, it's like, okay, theoretically, you could have it privately owned, but have certain laws that prohibit them from doing these things. But it's like, A, it will always be an inherently fragile and contentious situation because the private sector will always agitate against these laws, and they'll try to undermine these laws, and they'll try to find loopholes. And B, frankly, these libertarians will complain about that too. That won't be good enough for them. It's like, it's not good enough to have the private sector own these places but mandate that they take care of them. It's like, no, they should be allowed to do whatever the fuck they want, and they'll only take care of them if it's profitable, which it never really is. So I mean, it's kind of like libertarians, they won't be happy with that compromise anyway, so why give it to them? It's just a foot in the door. It's just a foot in the door because they want every natural wonder to look like Clifton Hill and Niagara Falls. Like, that's basically it. So that's one example. There's many, like museums would be another example, public transit, like things that are just not inherently profitable and things that these people will often ruin if they get their hands on them, which is why the government, at least ostensibly, has a duty to the people. And yeah, the government's not perfect in these regards, but I think as a whole, yes, they do better than the private sector with certain things, like of this nature. Like, the government, at least in theory, has a mandate to the people, whereas the private sector only has a mandate to their shareholders. Ultimately, the public sector isn't perfect in this regard, but no, I do not trust the private sector with areas of natural beauty, with things like museums. I mean, yeah, okay, some private museums seem to succeed, but as a whole, museums don't seem terribly profitable. Same with public transit. I think there's only I've heard there's only one example of a profitable public transit system in the world, which is I think in Hong Kong. I'm not entirely sure on that one, but yeah. So another example of their flawed mentality is every time the government fucks up or fails at something, their solution is always to defund it more. And it's a very flawed mentality. It's like, if something is imperfect, the solution is always to sabotage it and make it even worse. It's like, maybe the solution in some cases is that these things need more funding or more attention, or they need smarter people to be working on these things. It doesn't mean that the solution is always to just defund them and deprioritize them and make them even worse. It's like this idea like, oh, I got my finger cut off, might as well cut off the whole hand. It's like, that's basically the mentality. It's like, something sucks, okay, let's make it suck more. It's like, why is that always their solution? And again, it's like, it's the same with like defund the police, which is actually bizarrely, defund the police is a case of left-wing liberals and socialists acting like libertarians, because it's like, oh, the police are corrupt and they're abusing their power. Oh, the solution is to defund them, which will make them worse, which will make the police more ineffective, which will basically potentially make them more corrupt. I mean, like, this idea that the solution, if something sucks, is to just make it worse. It's just such flawed, fallacious thinking. And another example of this, another example of a flawed, fallacious, individualist thinking is, okay, the NAP. The entire idea of the NAP, which is the bedrock of so much of their belief system. But the problem is they can never define the NAP properly. What constitutes aggression? Is if I'm walking next to someone's lawn and I'm cutting a corner a bit and I walk onto their lawn, is that violating the NAP? What about if somebody's setting off fireworks in the middle of the night on their own property, but they're waking up all their neighbors? Or shooting a gun into the air on their own property and waking up all their neighbors? Is that violating the NAP? If somebody's on a date with someone and they get a bit too handsy, is that violating the NAP? You know, like with all this like consent issues, like where do you draw the line? And it's like, the issue with that is like, there's no consensus on it. And it feels like the NAP is just a tool that they use against their opponents, and they just redefine it as they wish based on any given circumstance and what their ideology is. It's the same with like abortion on both sides. I see both sides trying to use the NAP to justify their argument. So it's like the NAP is just such an inherently tenuous concept because of what constitutes aggression, what constitutes violating somebody else's right to not have aggression against them. It's like, it's so tenuous that like, it seems like kind of a worthless principle because it's so inherently tenuous and open to debate. I don't know. I mean, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe there's some value to the idea of the NAP, but to me, it just seems like something that they just redefine at their whim. Like they just redefine it to suit whatever their beliefs are, whatever their ideology is, whatever stance they take on a given issue at a particular time. So yeah, I mean, all in all, okay, those are some of the most common fallacious bullshit or just wrong, whether it be morally wrong or logically wrong, stances that I see libertarians, individualists, conservatives, free market capitalists, the individualist right, whatever you want to call these people, that I see these types of people use on a regular basis.